the fact that pensioners are being given so little is as a result of the way that government have set up pension systems. I think that actually we should be looking towards a more private system. Countries like Singapore have done this really well.
Literally, she's out here and going, you know what's the problem with the state pension? It's not privatised enough. Yeah, the problem isn't in terms of the rate of state pension. The problem is it's not privatised enough. One of the biggest kind of discussion pieces for the last week or so has been around the winter fuel payment. What I've been saying the whole time is, right, just make it universal and then tax it back from rich pensioners, because you don't need any extra administration. There is already a tax system in place. And that means nobody falls through the cracks and everybody who gets it is somebody who needs it, right? You give £300 to millionaires because you tax it back off them. And in what, quite frankly, is a turnout for the books, the Labour Party seem to be watching my stream. UK considers taxing pensioners to claw back winter fuel payment. Plans being looked at following Starmer's policy U-turn this week, say officials. The contentious winter fuel payment could be restored to all pensioners under plans being considered by Downing Street, with the sum being recouped from higher income pensioners through their tax returns. Now, Keir Starmer's potential U-turn on the winter fuel payment was debated on Talk TV the other day by somebody who represents a lobby group for pensioners and a think tank wanker, friend of the show, named Reem Ibrahim from the Institute of Economic Affairs, against somebody who got famous on TikTok and then was employed by the IEA think tank to do their communications. It just shows how thin on the ground the think tanks are for people who agree with them who are younger than the age of 50. Anyway, let's have a watch.
Dennis, let me start with you. Are you welcoming this wholeheartedly or with caution?
Well, definitely with a lot of caution and a little dose of scepticism as well, Peter. Yes, it's welcome and it's justification for our long campaign on this issue. But we don't know whether it's going to be a screeching U-turn with a complete reversal of the policy, or just some minor fiddling around the edges, which won't be satisfactory at all. He had to do something. Because
do you think every single pensioner should get the winter fuel allowance?
I mean, it is interesting how it does seem to be the most pensioners that I've heard who get mad at the winter fuel cut. Most of them that I've seen are people who really do not need it. But again, like, universal benefits are better than means-tested benefits, and you should just do the tax taper as was suggested in the FT article. That is the fairest way of doing it, because that means everyone gets it. No one falls through the cracks because it's being given out and then only taxed back from the wealthy pensioners. And it means that you can at least have some level of stratification rather than a cliff edge. At the moment, there is a group of people who don't get pension credit because they're just over the limit for pension credit. So they end up getting less than people who are on pension credit because they get topped up twice by the credit itself and then also the winter fuel payment. So there is a much better way of doing this, which is universalism plus a tax taper. But I'm not sure that's what Silver Voices is suggesting here.
Well, yes, I do think that.
Even millionaire pensioners?
Universal benefit before. Now, the argument always is, and I've argued this out on your programme before, that a few millionaires don't need the money. Yes, but it's very difficult indeed. I agree with that. But it's very difficult indeed to actually have an assessment which rules out those millionaires.
Well, you're right, Dennis, and that means testing costs a lot of money. Reem, means testing is too expensive, surely, isn't it? And the full benefit for everybody, universal benefit, is the correct answer, is what Dennis is saying. What do you think of that?
And this is basically true when it comes to most welfare. Most welfare is something that can be done on a universal basis that then gets taxed back. There's a really great article by Matt Bruenig for People's Policy Project, which is a left-wing crowd-funded think tank, so it's not ad hoc to any kind of big donors. It's all about the actual policy itself. And there's a really great article about why means testing costs more than universal benefits that everyone should go read, and I will leave the link in the description later on. But broadly, I think that that's right. The argument of, well, some millionaires get it when they don't need it. I'm like, well, sure. The issue is, of course, is that as soon as you start doing a means test, people might not apply for the means test. You might get it wrong. People might get incorrectly adjudicated to be above the threshold rather than below it. And therefore, people might miss out. And universalism is a way of ensuring that everybody gets it. Everyone gets it who needs it. The issue, of course, is that when it comes to generational unfairness. Pensioners have much more wealth than the other generations do. Pensioner poverty is not as much of a problem as it used to be. So the fact that we're focusing on this rather than on benefits for younger people who are more at risk of poverty, I think that's a little bit unfair. But broadly, I do support universalism, just as this guy pointed out here.
Yeah, I do disagree. I think, look, fundamentally, a lot of pensioners have been going through incredible amounts of hardship, and it's really important that we have those serious conversations about why there has been that hardship in the first place, where we can reduce energy costs. And I think a lot of it is as a result of huge regulations around energy. I mean, net zero being a legally binding target in that way has put up energy costs for everyone.
Well, that's just fundamentally not true. The reason why our energy costs are much higher than those on the continent is because we're still relying on more fossil fuels than they are. The strike price for gas power is much more than the strike price for renewables. It is the countries that have the greater renewables mix that have the lower energy prices, whether that be, for example, the Scandinavian countries like Denmark, which use a lot of wind and solar. There's a lot of wind and solar being used in the Netherlands as well. We have countries like France who use a lot of nuclear, and countries like Norway that use a lot of hydroelectric. All of these countries have lower energy costs than we do because they rely less on gas power. And fewer rely on gas boilers as well to heat their homes too. So net zero is not why we have high bills. It's a lack of action and a lack of investment into renewable alternatives from the last 14 years of Conservative government. And of course, very little action to redress that from the new government and previous failures from 1979 on until today.
But the principle remains that if you are a millionaire, should you be in receipt of government benefits? And I think that the answer is no, and it can't ever be possibly yes. I understand.
Do you disagree with the winter fuel allowance in principle, Reem, as an idea?
Yes, because fundamentally it's giving cash handouts to people that do not need it. Now, many of
it gives lots of cash handouts to people who do need it as well.
Look, I think that it means testing the winter fuel payments, which is effectively what would happen under this new scheme. So if you are already in receipt of pension credit or other benefits, I think we can increase the threshold. Right now, it's about £11,800 a year, if that's what your income is. I think we can definitely increase the threshold and talk about whether or not enough people are actually receiving pension credit. But fundamentally, the principle remains, not every benefit should be universal. And actually, if you are somebody like Alan Sugar, you are a millionaire, you should not be in receipt of government benefits. And fundamentally, we are paying the highest tax burden since the Second World War, huge amounts of money being spent. And actually, the tax burden is predicted to get even higher.
Reem's right.
It's just frustrating to hear. Like, remember earlier I mentioned that when you look at Conservatives and the way they approach policy, it's about what makes me feel good. It's not about what has the most utility. It's just about feelings, right? And you know that she's come to this position because her opening gambit is there is no situation where it's correct to pay the winter fuel payment to a millionaire pensioner. And of course, if you have a tax taper like's been suggested earlier, that would recoup it back from them anyway and would maintain the universality of the payment, right? Which is, of course, a situation where you are paying this benefit out to the rich and then taxing it back from them. So that undermines her thesis. But of course, that would be a rational thing talking about utility. And in her mind, there can be no situation because it just feels bad to her, the idea of the government paying welfare to millionaires, even if there is a way of remedying that by recouping it through tax. Because again, she's also against higher taxation. She's like, oh, we're already being taxed too highly. Tax burden still going up. And I'm like, well, yeah, we're kind of middle of the pack in European terms. And that's probably why our public services, where our tax rate is lower, are worse than the public services in countries like Denmark, Norway, Sweden and Finland, where their overall personal tax rate and their overall tax burden as a percentage of GDP is higher than ours. I wonder why they have better public services and we have worse public services. And worse welfare state as well. We're the most punitive welfare state in Europe.
Isn't she, Dennis? Reem is right in that the increasing the threshold on getting some element of means testing is actually not a bad idea, especially when the Alan Sugars of this world, and actually many people who earn an awful lot less money, who could in theory give it to charity but often don't, they don't need the winter fuel allowance, do they?
I don't agree with anything that Reem says, because her organisation doesn't agree with any pensioner benefits. It doesn't agree with the triple lock. I don't think it agrees with the state pension. So I take what she says.
Do you disagree with the state pension, Reem?
I think that there are better ways to reform it. I think the fact that pensioners are being given so little is as a result of the way that government have set up pension systems. I think that actually we should be looking towards a more private system. Countries like Singapore have done this really well, and it would mean that pensioners are lifted out of poverty. So
Okay, I think that's
I
think that's a bigger debate, and maybe
Literally, she's out here and going, you know what's the problem with the state pension? It's not privatised enough. Our state pension, our measly state pension in comparison to a bunch of other countries, which, to be fair, have like different pension insurance systems, for example, but it is what it is. We still don't have a great state pension compared to other European countries. And she's like, yeah, the problem isn't in terms of the rate of state pension. The problem is it's not privatised enough. Again, just want to point out, it is institutions like Reem Ibrahim's, like the Institute for Economic Affairs, right-wing think tanks, who helped shape the policy of selling off our oil and gas reserves in the North Sea into private hands for shareholder benefits, when in Norway, they capped that state-owned, at least 70% state-owned, the company Equinor that is, to generate revenue for the state, for their sovereign wealth fund, which again has 1.5% of all shares in the world in its ownership, which has created the biggest pension fund in the world. That's how Norway funds its pensions, which are much more generous than ours, through owning its own natural resources. And here we are further down the line, where we have worse public services, worse pensions, but of course Centrica and people who benefited from owning our oil and gas in our North Sea rather than our state, their shareholders walking off given with huge amounts of dividends, despite the pensioners who are having to deal with the high energy bills that she says are bad, are a result of this failed policy, and we also have worse pensions because of it.
Maybe we'll have that bigger debate on another occasion, but I want to let Dennis finish his point there.
Well, yes, I mean, the fact is that 10 million pensioners lost their winter fuel payment this winter. Millions of those actually struggled to pay their energy bills as a result of this. Millions of those people had to cut down on food. Millions of those people actually wore outdoor clothes indoors. Millions of those people cut down their social activities because of this callous policy. Now, the best way to resolve that cheaply, in the sense of not having means testing, administrative apparatus and so on, is to restore the payment in full. If they then want to come back later and have a discussion with us about, perhaps putting the means testing at the level of the higher rate of tax, for instance, that anybody above the higher...
Why not just sort it out now, Dennis? Why not just get it all done and dusted now, get it sorted out and with a permanent system so everybody knows where they are?
Well, yes, but...
I mean, I do agree closer with this as a means test, but again, like, this still allows some people to fall through the cracks, or it doesn't have any specific person. There could theoretically be people who would miss out who need it in terms of overall poverty, depending on what outgoings and incomes are. Like, the high rate of tax, maybe that is a reasonable cut-off point, but if you're going to do it based upon tax rates, make it universal and tax it back. That seems like a much easier way of doing it.
But we're talking about next winter, and the other worrying thing about the speech today...
There's plenty of time between now and next winter. The government can do things very quickly. They sorted out the Scunthorpe blast furnace in a day.
Look, the point I'm making is, you didn't let me finish, Keir Starmer said that he would announce the policy at the next fiscal event. The next fiscal event is the budget...
No, it's not. It's the spending review next month on the 11th of June, Dennis.
No, I'm afraid that that question was asked after the speech in Parliament, and it was clearly said he's talking about a fiscal event. The spending review is not a fiscal event in the same way. So time is short to do this. We can't revamp the whole policy, but we can restore the universal winter fuel payment for this winter, and that's the most important thing.
Reem, final word for you?
If I could just come back on that, where I do agree with Dennis is the timing of this. So when the cuts to winter fuel payments were made, they were so immediately before winter that actually I don't think many of those pensioners that were eligible for pension credit, they were eligible for that additional money, and they weren't able to be communicated that kind of policy idea. So a lot of them weren't able to receive the money they were entitled to. So where I do agree with Dennis is that the timing has to be right. But the principle of means testing benefits, I think, has to always be upheld, because fundamentally it is unfair that people like myself are being taxed to the...
And again, unfair is a word that means nothing. Unfair is meaningless. Fair or unfair means different things to different people. It is not a point that is relevant in any debate or any discussion, right? Fairness is totally subjective. Make a utilitarian case, Reem. Frame your argument in utility, because then you can make a justification. Unfair means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. And again, you made the point, oh, it's done so late so some people couldn't apply, or they were confused about how to apply and had to learn how to do it, to fill in these forms, whatever. That's exactly the cracks that people fall through when you means test a benefit in any case. That's what happens when you means test any benefit. People fall through the cracks, which is why you make it universal and you tax it back. It's really not difficult. You're just making the case as to why means testing is bad because you've shown a very specific situation where it actually allows people to be missed by the policy when they do need it because of the means test specifically causing that, which wouldn't have happened under universalism.
The oblivion to give cash handouts to millionaires. I'm sorry, but I can't ever see a system in which that is fair.
Fine.
And again, it's exactly going back to what I said before, where essentially her entire argument is, it makes me feel bad. That's it. Feels over reals, and that's what happens with right-wingers all the time. It makes me feel bad that millionaires are receiving a benefit. Can't justify why it is bad or why that is negative utility. Just, wow, I feel bad about it. Well, again, propose a solution like the one I have proposed that maximises utility for everybody.
Final word from Dennis.
You can't justify a policy which penalises 10 million pensioners on the basis of a few millionaires who maybe shouldn't.
25% of pensioners are millionaires, Dennis. You know that.
That's rubbish, and I've argued that before. It's absolute rubbish what you are talking, and it's.
Well, it's literally 100% true. Although the measurement is 25% of pensioners live in a household with a combined net worth of £1 million or greater. So they have, under that metric, a lot of actual assets in their ownership as a household, right? It's with the households they live in rather than individual levels of wealth. So there is a lot of pensioners who are very wealthy in terms of assets. Does that necessarily correlate to income? Well, potentially not. Should they be incentivized to downsize, for example? Well, potentially. Well, of course, have house prices been increasing for far too much? Yes, they have been. So there are myriad issues which underpins why so many pensioners are millionaires. But also that includes the amount of pension provision they have as well as the homes that they own. So it doesn't necessarily correlate to overall individual income. But of course, then you would say, well, if you have a really expensive house, why didn't you sell your house and downsize to a different one so you can afford this stuff? Either way, the important point is that this all gets solved by making the payment universal and then taxing it back from wealthy pensioners. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.